Hello and welcome to my studio. I'm Mara Trumbo and I would like to thank you for welcoming me into your home and allowing me to share some of my experience in painting. From this black canvas we're going to be painting a mountainscape. I used to love painting them plein air when I lived in Tennessee. Now that I'm in Florida I have to rely on my memory and my imagination, but I'd like to guide you through step by step and convert this to that. Let's get started with the background, which is the sky behind the mountains. This is done with three colors, with ultramarine and cerulean blue, as well as alizarin crimson and white. But first we prepare the canvas by putting a very thin light coat of liquid white. This is available in most stores. The most famous brand, of course, is the Bob Ross one, but you can actually make your own if you're using water miscible oils like me. I prefer to mix my own, and it's done with titanium white and the medium with linseed oil and the odorless terps. So you're using a crisscross fashion here and then just putting it horizontal there. And I'll suggest, instead of doing the whole canvas, only going halfway at this stage. Put out only as many colors as you need, and you can see how little I use. When you watch the big brushes on TV, of course, you see huge blobs of paints for two reasons. The manufacturers want you to buy more, and they wish to show it better on television. And plus, the artist gets them free of charge, and he doesn't mind the waste, but I do, and I'm sure you, if you're on a budget like me, you will look after your paints as well. So a little ½ inch at the time is plenty. You always start at the corners with the darker blue. Don't make an exact triangle there like I have just done. Push it out and change its shape, but it's always darker on the corners. And as you come in, the white you already have underneath will dilute it. So you're becoming lighter and lighter as you come down towards the horizon and towards the center of the sky. I'm switching now over to a little bit of cerulean blue. That was a hair I've just wiped out on my paper towel. Use good paper towels. I use Viva, and I don't get paid to advertise, but I love it simply because the paper doesn't break like some of the cheaper brands. It doesn't make a noise while I paint, and it doesn't leave hairs on your canvas if you need to remove something. So you see me painting the sides and the top of the canvas here. That's because I have gallery wrap canvases and I want the painting to continue its story around the corner, top, bottom and sides. But since this is oil and difficult to handle, I suggest you do yours only at the end. Just make sure you match the colors. So after the cerulean blue, we go into the alizarin crimson. It's a very strong color, as you'll see when it comes up. So use a little bit at a time. Whoops, there's another little hair. No, actually there's possibly a little bit of dry paint around the tube cap. But you can always remove them with your brush. Don't get panicky if you see a lot of the new brushes will lose their hair. A lot of the old brushes will lose their hair. And it's hard to just have them in between not losing any. But that's no big deal. One thing I would worry about is if you're painting in the open air and little flies and dust stick to your painting. That it's not pleasant to try and remove afterwards, especially if you've made a real good painting and you're trying to sell it at the end of the open air show, which has been fun to do in the past. So this alizarin crimson is mixing with the blue underneath, and it's forming a lilac color, which you can see it's very light so far, and now that I've picked up a little bit too much, it's much darker. But I'm not going to panic because the mountains are actually going to be covering that portion there, and only what I'm going to allow to go above, which is now blended with the white and the blue and will be much lighter, will show through the mountain peaks. Now you may ask, how do I know where the mountain peaks are going to go? I suggest you follow the video before you read the instructions and paint without seeing how I've done it. I prefer for this particular issue to be done freehand without a pattern. There's just too many items there to include on a pattern, and also it gives you a good exercise in eventually doing all your own designs. And anything you don't like can always be removed or improved upon. So now I'm switching over to the fan brush, and I'm going, if you notice, I've only loaded the one side, and I'm going round and round in circles. This will create like the silver lining of your clouds, as it were, because when I turn it to the other side, which has got no paint, I use it to assimilate that white with the color underneath. So you want the one side of the white to be a little bit brighter to form the silver lining, as I mentioned, and the inner side to assimilate with your sky or the color of your cloud underneath. This will give you little pinkish clouds at the horizon line. And this is, of course, now the stronger white, which is titanium white out of the tube, because the liquid white would be too sloppy and soft, and it would run if I had to use too much of it with the other color in combination. Now, when you get through to the horizon, normally the clouds are not strong and billowy, so you can hold your brush sideways, still do your little curlicues there, but stretch those clouds across the horizon. They're more like diagonal lines than there are round big clouds. Just adding some more on the right side. And you could play with this for hours. I absolutely love cloud formations. I'm always threatening to do one painting just on skies, and one of these days I will. You can never get to the same, of course, because a lot depends on the pressure of the brush that you're putting behind. Now I've picked up a mop brush. This is a very large one, and I'm just touching it very softly with the corners to remove the big lumps. And this will finish this sky section. Well, I thought I was done. Now I see a little side on the right hand side. It's got a little bit too much blue, so I'm cleaning my brush and picking up some clean white, and I'm just going to strengthen some of those clouds on the right hand side. Again, using the fan on the one side in circular motion, and very, very soft. You don't want too much here, and you don't want to make it too heavy, otherwise it begins to look pasty. And you can see as you're working into the sky, some of the color underneath can come through if you're pressing hard enough. So you can change. If you feel you've got too much white there, you can get back to the blue underneath. You can add a little bit more pink to it. And I love those little pink clouds, but they must also have a little silver edging to stand out. So I'm adding some more white in there, softening it up with the blender. You can also get the smaller round blenders if it's easier for you to handle. It's just that I had my full set of Bob Ross brushes with me. I thought I'll take them out of mothballs and use them again today. I so love many techniques, but quite often I paint them with different brushes from other different workshops. So now here comes a test. I've diluted some blue paint on my smallest brush. It's a little small flat, and I'm freehanding some of the ranges. This is going to be the one furthest away, so it's slightly lower, and then the peaks that are coming towards the middle of the composition, I may have overdone it. I may have taken out that beautiful pink cloud over there, but doesn't matter. You can do 2 or 3 of these and have fun with every one of them. Just try not to make your peaks to look like pyramids or upside down ice cream cones. Break them up, shake your hand as you do them, and make sure that not 2 are the same. So once you've got the outline, you load up your palette knife, mix up all the dark colors you have on your plate there, the alizarin crimson, the blues. You can add a little bit of green, you can add a little bit of black, and you make a very dark color. You then spread it out and you make a little roll of it at the end of your knife, and you start following that line. So what you want is a nice clean edge, so follow that line precisely. You can change it here and there if you want to, that's no big deal, but what you want is the least amount of paint there. You don't want big blobs of paint. And then we're going to spread that paint onto the color that's already underneath. And the recipe for this is on the right side you would put your strokes towards the right, in the middle you come straight down, and on the left you go towards the left. Now here I've switched to the plastic trowel palette knife just to show you that it can be done, the same thing can be done with many tools. You don't have to have precisely what the big master used on television. You can make do with a lot of things. And I actually like this one because it's twisted and my finger puts as much or as little pressure as required on there. I find it easier to handle than the straight knife. Now this is the mountain range that crosses in front of the little mountain at the back. So again, minimize the amount of paint here. You don't want too much because the more dark you have, the harder it's going to be to have the snow coming white on top. And what I meant by double peaks, here's one here. You don't want a straight slope coming down like an ice cream cone. You want to break it here and there. There'll be rocks on the way. Now here's a new one. It's a cut up hotel card, or actually this one is a gift card from Publix, I think. And I cut it on the diagonal. Very easy to handle because your fingers are actually closer to there, so you can put as little or as much pressure behind it. I love making rocks with this tool as well. In fact, I cut one of them with serrated edge scissors, and it gives me some lovely texture when I want to play around with the rocks. But this is just to show you the different tools that you can use every time. Don't go rushing out buying new stuff just because you feel you've got something missing out of your toolbox. You can make do with this. So now you can also spread that rock formation with a damp, flat brush. So here is, these are water soluble oils as I mentioned earlier. So I've wet my new brush in the water, taken out the extra water from it, but it is damp, and so it's spreading the paint very, very nicely. If you're painting with traditional oils, of course, you would have to use a little bit of terps on there. But depending on the thickness of your paints, this is working out very well. So down on the straight on here. And of course, as the paint moves, it already forms peaks and valleys and fissures and cracks, and no two mountains will ever be the same with this. The pink is showing through there, which I'm happy with. That strong pink I painted earlier when I was making the horizon. And when we put the snow on top and the pink comes through, it's actually a very pleasant look. So there I've smudged it, no problem. I'll just make that little peak a little bit less pointy. So I'm just cleaning my brush off at the bottom because we want that to be soft now. Between the valley floor and the mountains, I'm going to be adding some more white. And what you want to do is to create that soft, misty look, like you're having a look at that mountain first thing in the morning. But first we're going to put the snow that's going to be melting down our slopes. So I've decided the sun is shining on the right-hand side of this mountain range. So very softly with your knife, you actually smooth the paint very softly. You just basically let the canvas grab what it wants. And there's little cracks in between, you don't want to fill them because they look like fissures coming down those ski slopes. There'll be trees there, there'll be cracks, there'll be rocks. So while I've got the white in my hand, I'm going to do all the whites at the same time. If I were painting in acrylics, I'd be holding two brushes in my hand at this stage, one with the shadow colors, the bluish black shadow colors, and one with white, and I would alternate because the paint would dry so quickly. But since this is oil and it'll stay open for a long time, I'll do all the white first and then I'll put in the shadows. And here again, you don't want to have candy stripe mountains. You don't want to have them cut exactly in the middle either. So create your own landscape here. Make the slopes gentle by gliding your knife sideways rather than straight down, like they're coming down a precipice. And always think the sun's coming on the right. And if you make some boo-boos, like I do quite often too while I'm painting, and I say, oops, that should have been the shadowy side. No problem, we'll correct it afterwards. Now, because I was filming and I'm standing on the left-hand side, I have to tell you what happened here. The camera switched itself off. I think the battery ran out. So by the time I loaded it up and went and put it on, I suddenly realized that all I had caught was the one tail end of putting in the dark shadows of the mountain. So I'm going to be removing some of this paint that has been put on the shadow side, and I'll be repainting it again for you. And it's possibly a good lesson for you to learn that if you make a mistake, whether you're filming or not, it's never too late to remove the underlaying paint, scrape it off with your little knife, and you can repaint over it. So here I go, touching up some of the peaks. That's the dark side, which is blue and white, and the paint was a little bit stripy, so I'm going back and forth with my knife to make it a little bit more textured. And then doing some little mountain passes up there. I guess that's for the little goats to jump on. I used to take ski tours to Austria when I was a travel agent in Africa, and it was part of the graduation program for seniors. I used to take them skiing and experience snow. Having been born in Africa, half of them had never seen it, and that was really a fantastic experience up the Tyrolean mountains. So here I'm doing it with the plastic hotel card or gift card that it's been cut up. And the mixture on the other side, it's blue with a little bit of white, and the black underneath can come through if you're not too heavy-handed. But of course, with me having scraped it, it's not as hard.
Hello, are you with me so far? Hope you're enjoying yourselves. It's time to give it a break and wash your brush if you've only got one. And you'll notice the difference between the background of my mountains here and the original photograph. They're a little bit bluer, so the choice is yours. When you make that mix of the dark colors, you know, the red, the brown, the green, the black and the blue, you may want to substitute less of the black and put more of the blue. And we already had the pink underneath, so actually in this instance I didn't add any alizarin crimson because a little bit that's shining through is from the cloud and the sky formation we did earlier. So as I said, when you paint freehand, it's lots of fun because you'll never ever get to the same again. Enjoy the rest of it, coming up now.
So just like when I was finishing the clouds, I move back and I look at the mountains and realize that some of them could do with a little bit more shadow. That mountain at the back, although it's further away and it should be lighter, it was a little bit too light. So I'm just adding some blue shadows, and I'm making that blue a little bit lighter than the ones in the front here, which have got obviously the darker grayish blue shadows. Now, when you put your colors on your palette, you're meant to marbleize them. That means you want a little bit of different blues, a little bit of different grays on there, and you don't want to mix them like a Betty Crocker cake. But at the same time, you also don't want the effect to be a candy stripe like it's coming out here sometimes. So with the palette knife, I touch them up again afterwards to form a little bit of a texture. And I'm also noticing while I was doing this peak that the other side, which is meant to be the sunny side with snow, is not there, and I'll be correcting that in a minute. And I guess I had better hurry up, because if these are called melting snow, just now all the mountain would have melted, and I'm still sitting here with my palette knife. It is a fun exercise, I must say. I enjoy it every time. And again, never twice the same mountain range. Now the bit on the far left could be left like that because it's going to possibly have trees in there, but just in case it's going to show, I decided I'm going to make it look like a little glacier there, and that's where the water's starting to run down, hence the name Melting Snows. Here we are. The middle ground is now complete. Just one or two little more touches. Now if Bob was still here, he'd say, put that knife down, enough is enough. But he's not here, and I'm really taking advantage of having fun with the snow. You might get it right the first time and you don't need to do all these little touch-ups. But I feel if I do make a mistake while I'm taping, I need to show you how to correct it. So back to our big Bob Ross brush, the one we did the background with. And basically I'm just bringing some of the dark out very, very softly onto the remaining liquid white we have underneath there. And this is creating the valley floor that we're going to be working on next. So I'll be adding some more white here, and this will be the liquid white coming through at the bottom. And then this will be pounced upon, as it were, to form like a mist at the foot of those hills. So pounce as strong as you can onto that canvas. My cat was sitting by me when I did this, and he shot under the bed. And then take your blender and very, very softly just blend them as if that snow and that mist is all in one, but still with that very soft gray dividing line. There we are, and that's our nice little misty valley floor. For the distant trees, as you know, once you see trees at a distance, you're not seeing them green, even if they are evergreens. You're seeing them a bluish purplish shade. So I've loaded my small fan brush with the alizarin crimson and the blue, which makes a purple. And as it gets into the white, it becomes even a little softer. So the basically vertical strokes, and you can do some horizontal to just typify the fir trees in the distance. And of course, the further back you go, the smaller they become, right up to underneath that little small mountain at the back. And then we're going to do one or two in the front here, and just blend the shadows into the snow. And now you see them, now you don't. They're almost invisible, so you want to strengthen them up a little bit, but you don't want them too strong, because these are far, far away trees. The biggest one in here, you may want to put a shape on it by holding your fan brush sideways and going zigzag, zigzag across it. So now we're going to start with the foreground, and the landscape is going to be done with burnt umber and sap green and the yellow phthalo green. And sometimes I just pick up a little bit of each on my big brush, and that's the same old brush as before we had. Okay, it's been cleansed so it doesn't have blue in it this time. And you basically go in tap, 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 just to form a little hillside here coming into the valley. And it's going to be two sides sort of overlapping, meeting in the middle, where the river is going to flow through. The river that's being formed by the melting snows at the back that are coming right behind this little hill over here. You don't see the origin of it, but you're going to see it as it starts coming through. So this is done very, very softly. Again, we don't want any of the strong colors to come out, and all you're doing is really just base coating. It's like putting down grass seeds at this stage, and then eventually it'll grow. I'm starting to introduce a little bit of green on here, and with the brush just turning them up, and that can indicate small little shrubs and trees in the background. Yes, I still have some of the blue you're seeing, right? There's still some of the blue inside the hairs of that brush. But with the brown, it'll become a green, so that's quite okay. Now we're going to put some other little trees here, and because they're a little bit closer, although there's still purple shade, purple blue shade, we're going to make these a little bit stronger in color. Now please practice these trees. They're done only with the tip of your brush. Don't try and go down flat, because you'll end up with a huge, huge tree. So very softly, and as they come close, I'm adding a little bit more green onto that color mix. And you can always adjust them at the end. In between, I'm putting some, I guess it's an oak tree. It's done with the burnt sienna, and some shrubbery in front of it. And then we're going to take the palette knife, and if you only use the very tip that scrapes through the paint, and you can make instant little branches and tree trunks. You don't want a full tree trunk showing, you want section of it in between the branches. If they come out too strong, you can paint over it again. If you're nervous about using a large palette knife to make such delicate little lines, then you might want to try a stylo pen, that the thin end of it. It's a fun technique to do, especially if you're not at all comfortable also using tiny little liner brushes and paint for smaller areas. So let's see where to next. I think we need some more trees here on the right, but let's go to the far right first. We'll do a little grouping of little fir trees, and again make yourself the center line first, and then with the very tip of your brush go across. Pretend it's Zorro's sword, and you're going Z, 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 Z all the way across, and that helps you cover the center, the left, the right, and back to the center again. And it takes a little bit of practice, but it's fun. Alternate your greens as well. You don't want every single one of them to be exactly the same. And you can add later on the lighter color where the sun is shining on the right, and the darker colors on the left. And here comes a biggie. Now here I'm pressing the brush harder. I didn't have enough paint to complete it, so I'm going back. And as it often happens, little is always better, because when you pick up too much, you then get over exuberant and your tree becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's hard to stop once you started, because you feel you'll fix it next time. And this is where the problem was with the paint not wanting to stick to paint underneath, because I had too much. So I'm going to let the little tree rest a little while I do the grasses in front of it. And somehow I've picked up some of the cerulean blue with my green, which is a little bit strong, but that's okay. Everything goes. We'll subdue it in a little while by putting a little bit more yellow on top. Draw in some grasses. If they come too thick, the lines, you can again go over it with a brush. And if you're wanting taller grasses, what you want to do, it's a semicircle effect with the tip of your knife or your stylus. Just go around in semicircles, and that gives you nice little shaped grasses blowing in the breeze, instead of being straight up and down weeds. So some little bushes here again. It's a little hard trying to keep my hand out of your way. I'm putting a little bit lighter yellow on the right side where the sun is shining. This is meant to be springtime with the snows melting, so every bit of color in here goes. So what I'm doing now is actually just filling up the ground cover with just greenish, brownish paint. Whatever I've got on my palette is coming out now, so that we can start forming the rest of the landscape, the foreground, decide where the river is going to flow and where it's going to throw itself over a little waterfall into the landscape. So with a little bit of blue and white mixture on my palette knife, I'm coming straight across. Make sure that you level with the water at the top, and then zigzagging my way down the river. And as you come down, of course, it gets wider. And by using both the blue and the white, it looks like the water is running, and you've got little ripples in there. And if you can, pick up both of the blues. Sometimes near the river banks I even put in a little bit of green. And here is where the river is throwing itself down onto the second part of the river or a pond. We haven't quite decided what it is yet. So whenever you paint a waterfall, the underneath must be pretty dark. So I'm putting in the ultramarine blue at the bottom here, and adjusting some of the sides. Depending on how much space you got left at the bottom of your canvas, it's how deep you want to make your waterfall there too. If I had done my mountains further up into the sky, then I would have had a deeper waterfall coming down. So this will be your bank, your river bank. And there's escarpments that go down to the river on one side, and a more gentle river bank on the other side. So again, this is done with all the earth colors left on my palette, you know, the yellow, the brown, the green. And don't mix them, just pick up a little bit of each color on your palette knife. And this is beginning to form the rocky formation at the bottom here, which will then complete with big boulders. Something's got to hold that water in, so you don't want flat land all the way around. And then as you go up, this will become smaller and smaller and smaller, of course, further away. And you can even get into that with your paintbrush. I'm finding it more difficult on this side because don't forget I'm standing on your left side trying to stretch my arm across away from the camera. So do forgive if at times it goes a little bit out of focus. Here's where we're going to start forming rocks with the dark colors first, and then we'll put highlights where the sun's shining on. Shake your hand whenever you form rocks. Have some of the strokes going to the right, some to the left, some straight down, and we'll do it in close-up form. It's probably easier to do the bottom by turning the painting upside down now, so that the ledge of my easel doesn't interrupt my brush strokes. So be careful when you do this, you don't want it landing on the floor upside down. So again, we're going to do a little bit darker on the sides with the blue, the same as we did with the sky. Also because the sky is reflecting into the water, so you want it a little darker blue on the sides and lighter in the middle. And again, don't try and attempt to do the sides and the bottom and the top at the same time. If you've never painted in oils before, you're going to mess yourself up, and possibly you're painting too. So either leave the sides all together if you're going to have it framed, or if you want to hang it up as it is, once you finish painting and it's safe to handle, then start painting the sides, the top and the bottom. And don't hang it on your wall until it's totally dry, or you'll be redecorating your house too. So here comes a magic trick again. I have to sneak up behind it. And of course that color should come straight under the waterfall, but I'll do that with the smaller brushes when I turn it round again. I added a little bit of alizarin crimson there again because of the reflection of the sky. You want a little bit of pink in the water as well. So we're right side up again here, and we can start working on our rocks. So I'm trying to level the water there and get rid of some of that color there. It's a little bit too strong. Just work it in. So the rock colors that you should have out are burnt umber, burnt sienna, some black, your yellows, your oranges, even a little bit of red. And rock formations, a lot depends on the minerals that are in the area, of course. So rocks can be grayish, can be brownish, can be reddish, can be bluish. So this instance, I'm just throwing in some blue and black there because it's on the shadow side now. And of course the water reflects on the rocks. The rocks are wet, so they'll be sparkling with a little bit of blue and black in there. And if I over touch it, of course I'll lose half those colors again. So I'm putting a little bit of yellow and white on top. And you can play again with all your tools here, your metal palette knife, your plastic trowel, and your plastic card as well. Use up all the dirty colors that are on your palette right now. That's a fun part of making rocks as well. I have a nice mixture of mud. So bear in mind the dark coral is at the bottom there because the sun is not hitting this part, and also because the water will be wetting those rocks. Now we're switching to using the card here again. A little bit of white and a little bit of yellow is going to go on top again. And if you just stroke it very slightly on top, it gives you that variegated look, very much like you were doing the snow on the mountains. You're now doing it to the rocks in here. It's not snow, it's moss, and it's texture, and it's anything growing on it. But the more you play with it, the nicer rocks come out. And if you go over the waterfall, don't let it worry you. We can bring the waterfall over the rock again. It all depends where the rock is positioned. If it's in front of the waterfall and the water's falling behind, then you can bring, like I'm doing now, the highlights all the way down there. If later you feel you want the rock to flow over that waterfall at the side, then we'll just bring, once we use the white for the spume of the waterfall, we'll bring it over. So the scenery can actually be changed any time along the process of painting this picture. You'll be growing trees and rocks. See there, I had lost my lights. I'm putting them back, but there's more yellow than white this time. Now to show you how we go and do the waterfall, it's done with the comb, otherwise known as a rake brush, straight down, and you want to load it with very thin white. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too blobby. Very thin so that you can still see the blue in transparency underneath. Then we're going to level the water level there, bring some of the white highlights over there, and we'll let that white settle and later on go back on it again. Then underneath I'm turning my brush sideways to form some of the foam. And here's a little bit of a close-up. Sorry, the camera is trying to find its focus there. And as I'm touching the rocks, some of the brown is coming onto the brush, and that's okay, because you will have reflections in the water of some of those rocks. You will get dirty water there, so if you're picking it up, don't let it worry you. Then just stroke into a cradle fashion, back and forth, to form the waves of the currents there. I'm trying to put some little white sparkles in there, but I'll go back on it by using the other brush, the deerfoot, later on. So back to the dark colors to create more rocks. And wherever rocks overlap one another, you can decide which one is forward and which one is back simply by making it light or dark. And this is one learning exercise of a lot of different techniques, and it'll help you with future paintings, not only if you're doing mountainscapes, but with seascapes and rocks and cliffs and floral paintings. I like to often mix the two of them, a landscape with a flower at the side or a garden blooming in front of it. So it's always a learning exercise. Be careful when you go for highlights. White on its own, it's very strong. You have to start blending it in with the other colors of the rock underneath so that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. Now, if the rocks are using a lot of your paint, it's actually probably a good thing because the texture will make them look three-dimensional when the painting is dry. If you're getting bored painting rocks, we can start on something else. I quite often do that. I jump around my painting when I'm doing too much of the same thing. So from left we're going to right, we'll do another little rock, and then we can start doing some landscaping. And instead of doing 3 separate little rocks here, I'm joining that one to make it one big stone, one big boulder. Now you can see why I said this would be a difficult project to have a pattern for, because it's anything goes. And if I had to draw every single pebble, every single stone and tree in here, you would have a problem, because you also got to put an undercoating of the white underneath. So it would have meant tracing the pattern very, very strong for it to still shine through the liquid white, and it may not have been the ideal thing. So the best thing is for you to perhaps enlarge the photograph you're getting with this package and keep it close by. And what I suggest often is, in fact, since you're getting it digital, use it as a screensaver. I often do that. I put it as a screensaver, either horizontal or vertical, whichever suits you best. And that way you can see close-up details too. And you can keep your computer open while you're painting. Am I having fun with these rocks or what? I used to be a hairdresser, and I took as much care of doing my clients' hairs as I do with my paintings. You know, you sort of make love to a painting for hours and hours, always thinking you can improve it, but sometimes less is more. And I used to do the same with the hair. I specialized actually in when curls were in fashion with long hair, and doing bridal hairdos. And this just reminds me of it, fussing up to the last detail. So now we're going to start with a little bit of landscaping. I'm going to put some shadows under those trees to define that little hill in the back there. And I'm using my comb or rake brush here, just so that they become wispy and soft. Then back to the big brush, I'm going to put in some stronger feel of grasses and rocks showing through, and whatever's making up that slope of that hill coming down. I hate using the same green. As much as I loved one of the teachers on PBS doing landscapes, it seemed that sap green dominated the scene. And even when it was lit up where the sun was shining a little bit, it was still the same sap green, just a little bit lighter. I like throwing other colors in with mine, and you can show your own preference for it too. Now, it's not going to stay like this. There'll be little flowers growing along this hillside, but it's just that the background, I want it a little bit more muted, all the autumn shades, in fact. So with the little rake brush, I'm pushing up some little grasses there in the background and in here, just to form some texture, going around the rocks here to remove some of that light area there, and very gently coming down to the riverbank. So this is the side that's got the smoother riverbank, and the other side has got more of an escarpment coming down. but you can do them equally, and if you like you can carry the rocks right through to the back, like the water is flowing through a rocky landscape. This can be a work in progress for days if you like, if you let it. And sometimes I do that, especially when I film it. What you're seeing in 1 hour, it's possibly taken me 3 full days. There's hours and hours of taping and editing and changing my script that I had typed out, the original step-by-step instructions, because sometimes what I said I will do first, I end up doing in the middle or last. So then at the end of filming, I have to marry the two up so that I don't confuse you too much. Again, just bringing in some of the grasses and some bushes here. Back to the field on the right hand side, I've got the big brush loaded up with a little bit of yellow and green at the bottom so that it's forming little daisy bushes along the field. And in order to highlight it, I put my brush sideways and unfortunately messed up the pattern, but that's okay, we can go over it again and smoosh it out. In fact, that way it creates a little bit of a softer effect, and then we can pick up the main color again and softly create some more daisies. You don't want the individual daisies done with a little liner brush, you want little clumps like this, and a little bit of yellow with a little bit of white to highlight it. And then we can go to the little bush at the back, which is the red one, and put up some little spikes up in front of it before we build up that little section. We're actually creating the stems right now with the rest of the green that was on the brush. And then with the small little pouncing brush, which is also deer foot, but it's brand new and it's a little bit tighter than the big one that we're using for the waterfall, we can pounce it up and down to form a little cluster of red flowers. These are actually like little snapdragons or some alpine flowers, nondescript little flowers that just look cute in the middle there. So a bit of white to determine their little tops, darker at the bottom. And as I said, the nondescript, you don't want anything too botanically correct that's going to confuse the eye. And again, we just scrape through some of the stems. And back working onto our rocks. We're finishing off the hillside, just the ground cover, going back with a little bit of brown and green. And this is where we're going to be putting some bushes as if we're standing on the opposite river bank. So I'm sorry it's a little bit out of your range, but I'm basically just pouncing some black or very dark color. It's a black blue green mixture here, and going across that empty space that I had purposely left earlier. So it's going to be a tree and a bush coming onto this side. And then with the deer foot, we're going to do the formation of its little branches. These are flowery branches, and it looks like mimosa in yellow and white on top of the black. Of course, that creates a green, you know that. Actually, black and yellow makes one of the nicest green. So the top is done in these colors, and the bottom we're going to go with orange and red. And again, it's nondescript, we're just doing little clumps. And I'm going to speed up the video here. You can, if you've got a larger deer foot actually, or one of those bush brushes, do that one with this, with a different brush. This is adding more of an autumn flavor to the painting than spring, really, because spring everything would be bright green, but I felt there was going to be too much green on this picture, so I wanted to add a little bit of color. And don't have everything round, bring some of the little sprigs out. Now when I tried to put in the branches again by scraping them with the tip of my brush and with the stylus pen, my camera played up again, unfortunately. So I missed it, but you've seen me use it before, so I'll put up a photograph and it'll show you how it looks like. This one is done with a little liner brush starting from the bottom. And then the tops is done by scratching the paint out with the stylus brush and the tip of the knife. Here we are. So you just scrape little lines, and you don't want too many long branches, you just want little bits and pieces here and there showing through the foliage. I'm bringing in the rock, finishing that rock off to go behind the tree, since I didn't do the tree all the way across. And making it a little bit taller, putting the highlight colors on top, the yellows and the oranges and the reds, and the bottom will be done dark again. So I decided this rock needed to be much taller than it was. I picked up white by mistake, but no big deal, because as you know, dirt colors will come into that white and make it the same color as its sister rock right next to it. Bit of yellow mixed in with the white to make the sun reflection at the side there. And blend it in, and voila, there's our rocks. So now what we need to put is a couple of ferns here on the walkway across the pond. And if you hold your fan brush and swivel it from a central point, it actually makes the fern for you. So you want dark in the middle and light on the edges where the sun is shining again. And don't make it look like a palm frond, because although there are palms in northern Italy and on the Tyrol, they're not very near the mountains. They're right down, closer to the warmer areas. So now we're playing with the water, and again the reflection of the rocks will be in the water, so you pick up some of the dirt at the bottom and spread it out, and again you're making little zigzags on the water to show the movement of the currents that the waterfall is forming. And as long as they're horizontal, not vertical, you go across, and using a lot of white and a lot of blue, we're going to do the foaming effects. I particularly like to load one side heavier than the other, so I may have blue on one side and white on the other, almost double loading my brush. And where the white is, like the silver lining on the clouds, I will leave the edge as it is and just work on the inside portion of it. The softening there, the water level into the rocks. And smudge all along there. It'll give you a little bit of a reflection of the rock. You could have even come out a little further, but I didn't want to muddy the waters up, as it were, too much. So again, blue and white, blue and white. Now you don't want big waves like surfing waves so you get in the open seas, but you definitely want to see the movement that the waterfall is creating in the water. So there will be ripples. And you can use some of the liquid whites if you have some left in your little dish, or the titanium white. At this stage, anything goes. You've got water reflections from the sky as well, so a little bit of pink coming in here, that's good too. And you can see how I'm pushing out the side of the brush that's got more white to follow the water, the surge of the water going down. So here is where you do some of the leveling of the waterline. And your palette knife is ideal for this. Especially to get into those little areas, you can turn it round and use the smaller end of the palette knife. Now we're back with a little deer foot loaded with bright, clean titanium white, and you're putting in the foam at the bottom of the waterfall and slightly decrease it as it comes out towards the rocks. I'm smudging some on the corner there where it's the waters are doing a little U-turn there to come back down this way, that side of the pond. If there's too much white, just with the corner of the small brush I picked up a little bit of blue and reinsert the blue in between the white. Same thing done with the card. Just to show you that you can obtain the same effects by using different tools. And here I had to lift the canvas off the easel to just catch the bottom end here. So one final look and see what needs fixing along here. Some more sunny on the rocks there. Sunny touches here and there. The water up in the gorge, level that out and straighten that entrance into the riverbed. Now we're going to put some daisies on a hillside. And again, using the little brush that we've just done the water spray with. It's loaded with green on its heel and white on its toe. And again, you want little clusters, you don't want individual daisies. If you have too much white, you just turn the brush around and put a little bit more green in between. And And of course you can please yourself if you want pink daisies there or blue daisies. Now I need to fix that peak. Remember, I was going to climb up on that mountain and fix it. Here we are. This is the time to do it. At the end, when you look at all your painting and find out all the little things that you could have done better. So the sunny side seems to have gone AWOL. So we're going to put it back again. Trying to find an angle so that I don't cover the camera lens with my hand. So here we are, finally found a little corner there to get it in and put some more on this little slope. Touch, 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 just a little bit of snow on the other side there. Fingers can do the walking too and the painting. Then if there's too much blue over there, we're going to reintroduce some of the white snow on that slope there. Just little corrections here and there that you feel would enhance your painting and make it look more professional. And I think we are done. Just one smooth little edge here. And that's done the peak of a mountain. Getting back to the waterfall, we're going to strengthen that waterfall there now, a little more shimmer. Basically just where the sun hits it at the beginning of the waterfall. And there we are. Now you can have your little blackbirds up in the sky in any positions that you like. I've chosen between the two peaks, and it's nothing but black on your liner brush. Oops, that wing is a little bit too long, so I'll just have to lengthen the other one. And they're shaped like an M and a V. I always like to think of letters of the alphabets when I paint my little birds. And I'm sorry, my hand is in the way. I'm painting his little body and head. Just a tiny resemblance of a bird. And then we're going to do the one above. And unfortunately, again, my hand was in the way, so, but here it's what it looks like. It's more of a V. And the little bird coming down. It's not correct there, so I'm going to just correct it there. Oops, no, we need to make it a little bit fatter by his body. And then the little one at the back, it's very distant and done just with the tip of your brush. And this is what they look like. Adding a few more flowers, going up that hill. Little grasses. One last look here and there. And why not? We'll put a few little blue ones on this side. Again, very, very soft. Don't make them too strong. You can make little lavenders in here too, if you like, with longer stalks. So a little pitter-patter along the banks. Getting small as you go down, of course. And let's move back and have a look at the whole thing. I think we are done. I hope you have enjoyed this class with me. My three little blackbirds and I invite you to come back and paint with me some more. I have done this scene several times and different outlooks every time, so please feel free to enlarge these photographs and enjoy them in your next creation of melting snows. Bye for now.